from self-discovery to unapologetic passion, from inner strength to outward influence. It's Your Turn charts the journey of empowerment. Welcome to our series, where the book comes to life. In each episode, we explore a chapter's wisdom through real stories. We uncover the strategies that turn potential into power. And we witness how one woman's journey can inspire countless others. Prepare to see yourself in these pages and voices. Because with every story, we're reminded, it's your turn to write the next chapter.
Welcome to a new episode of the It's Your Turn book interviews and to our conversation with Pamela Thompson, a remarkable leader and advocate for conscious women's empowerment. Pamela brings a wealth of experience from her diverse background, living and working across 5 continents, including managing teams in volatile environments and conflict zones. As the founder of Female Wave of Change Canada, Pamela is dedicated to promoting feminine leadership as a catalyst for positive global transformation. Her expertise in guiding women through change and uncertainty is reflected in her work as an author, a speaker, and a workshop facilitator. Pamela's literary contributions include the #1 best-selling book, Learning to Dance with Life, a guide for high-achieving women, and the international bestseller, The Exploits of Minerva, Reflections of a 60-something Woman. Her upcoming 3rd book promises to share life-changing experiences from her time in Afghanistan. In this interview, we'll explore Pamela's unique perspectives on the power of feminine values in shaping a better world. So join us as we delve into the wisdom she's gained from her global experiences and her vision for empowering conscious women leaders. Welcome, Pamela. It's an honor and a pleasure to have you here. How are you doing?
Thank you so much, Elena. It's my honor as well. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Absolutely. I'm so eager to learn from you. And I just wanted to know, when you hear this introduction, how does that make you feel?
Sometimes I think, did I really do that? Is that really me, right? And yeah, so it also makes me feel positive inside that I've been able to do what I have done so far, and I believe I still have more to do.
And you're not finished yet, aren't you?
I am not finished yet. That's
wonderful.
correct, Elena.
Wonderful. Now, the book It's Your Turn in part 5. It invites us to embark on an exciting journey, envisioning our next chapter. And this isn't just about setting new goals. It's about really imagining fresh possibilities for life and career. And envisioning our next chapter means opening our minds to new opportunities, embracing change with curiosity and courage, expanding our horizons beyond what is familiar, and listening to our inner voice and aspirations. And as we dive into this conversation with Pamela, I invite you to reflect on what inspires you, the challenges you've overcome, and the dreams that you hold for the future. So, Pamela, your unique global experiences and perspectives in leadership and empowering women, they provide profound insights into this transformative process. We have been talking before, and I know that. So let's just dive into your journey with the first question, and that is, what inspires you to continually envision new possibilities and expand your goals?
That's a great question, Elena. I have a strong core value, love of learning. So I feel I always want to learn more from others and from experiences. And I also want to make a positive difference in the world. And so that's another one of my top 5 core values, is making a positive difference or contribution. So those 2 core values really drive me, I would say. And my father, I'm the eldest of 3 girls, and I feel like my dad, who's passed sadly, he treated me in some ways like a boy. So he enabled me, like I was meant to, I could mow the lawn and shovel the snow, as well as do the indoor stuff with my mom, which is a good thing on reflection. And he always said, Pam, you can do anything you put your mind to. And I feel because of that, I shouldn't say a leg up, but you know what I'm saying? It's like it empowered me when I reflect on my life and what he did as a father to really encourage me. I collected rocks and minerals. Some girls were playing with dolls. I collected stamps, and I did a lot of things that weren't really girly things in the day. And I think that early, what should I say, those early affirmations and that planting that belief that I could do anything I wanted to do have really helped me to create the life that I have and continue to
Yeah,
create.
it's very powerful. It's absolutely so important how our caretakers impact us in a positive or sometimes in a less positive way in terms of our belief systems and our self-concepts. And then as we grow up, as we start into life, we all have these different experiences and perspectives and interests. And what I see often is that women are not really capable of leveraging these perspectives and interests in order to uncover fresh opportunities. So how do you do that? How do you like use what you've learned, what you feel, what you think in order to expand and see new opportunities?
One of the things that I do is that I really listen to my body and trust in my intuition. So whenever I'm in a position, I really get a strong message. I hear things largely. I can see images sometimes, but largely I get very strong messages. It's time to go. And when it's time to go, I either put it out to the universe and say, what's my next step? Or I get a very clear idea. Like at one point, I wanted to move from domestic consulting to international consulting. So I talked to a friend of mine who was well connected to people who are doing things globally. And I asked for an intro, and then I would take that person for lunch, for example, and tell them of my interest and ask for their ideas in terms of people to connect with, what were the best way to move forward. Yes. So that was really helpful. That's been really helpful throughout my life. Being well networked, but also being willing to reach out and ask other people who have walked that path what were their lessons and what would be their recommendations for me moving forward. Yeah.
Yeah, please continue.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about your question. I'm someone also who, I shouldn't say get bored, but that's not a very good word. But for a number of years when I was younger and I worked for other people in other organizations, I would, after a very short space of time, maybe 3, maximum 4 years, I would just know it was time to move on. So because of my personality and this inward way of being, to search for new ways of doing things, to search for new ways of understanding, to search to deepen my purpose or my mission, to find my mission in the world. That was really helpful, I would say, in helping me discover fresh opportunities and leverage diverse perspectives.
Yeah. You were just saying that you were listening to your inner voice. You also listen to other people. A very interesting a very interesting thing that happens when we share our ideas and our aspirations and what we want to manifest in the world is other people like projecting their fears or their own limitations. And one of the questions that I have often heard is, are you crazy? Are you sure you want to do this? Are you going to throw away all this? This is like your credibility and your things like that. And so basically, my question to you also is because you have done amazing things and remarkable things in your life, and it is sometimes about redefining boundaries, yeah, and really cultivate new domains. It's about embracing the unknown, which is so threatening for so many people. So how do you build the courage? Because I know that women that are watching this, that are listening in, are curious. You have your experience in Afghanistan, of all countries. If you want to travel to Afghanistan and you look on the internet for travel advice, they say don't go. Okay.
That's
So,
true.
where do you find the courage and where do you find this drive to do these things?
Yes. One of the things is one of my top 5 core values is adventure and freedom. And
Mm.
so I feel like a lot, if you look through my life, a lot of it is about adventure and saying, knowing in my body that it's time to make a change, and then saying, okay, what's next? And listening. The other thing I do is I spend a lot of time in nature. And the older I get, I realize how important my daily walks in nature are, at least 45 minutes. I'm very fortunate to live by the ocean and live by a beautiful park that was built in the 1800s. But really, yes, so that's part of it. But like really going inside, having that value of adventure and freedom. And I'm just, how have I demonstrated this courage? At one point, I really decided that I wanted to go to, a couple of things. At one point in my life, I realized that a lot of what I was doing was very left brain oriented, working with research institutions and helping them develop, like one of them, I was the consultant on a group that were developing what's called the Global Health Research Initiative, connecting researchers in Canada to researchers in developing countries to help address the issues that the developing country researchers identified. So that it was very interesting researching and writing program and policy documents in the health field, looking at the linkages between peace and health, for example, and then thinking, you know what? I really want to tap into my creative side. I'm so in my left brain. And that led me to study body-centered coaching to get out of my head and into my body. And then it led me to play with the concept of creative healing. What is that? And looking at how do you link. I actually created a virtual creative healing center on the web that would support people through a variety of life transitions. And it was supported by neuroscience, the health promoting and healing benefits of the arts, organizational development and organizational behavior, and change, like looking at and coaching. And so it was ahead of its time because it was really interesting, but I didn't get the ROI on it that I had hoped to. But anyway, just an example of how did that, having the courage, it's just really not just, but really believing and trusting. Listen to, and it's one of my keys in my first book, listen to and trust in your body's wisdom. So instead of listening to a whole lot of people outside yourself, it's so important to really take the time to go inside and say, what do I want? What's my next step? Who do I know? And the other thing is not totally to listen to people outside, because a lot of times they'll guide you down a path that sounds rationally like the right thing to do. But really, it took you down a diverted path to what your mission was meant to be in the world. And I believe I always learn from those diversions from the path. But it's, yeah, the older I become, the more I realize and I reflect and say, when I really listened to and trusted in my body's wisdom, that's when I really kept going on my path and moving forward toward my mission, which is to help build peace and understanding in the world.
Pamela, when you say this is basically your mission, what I'm interested to know is how you keep that alive. Because you said, a joke, I get bored easily and I'm looking for adventure, I'm looking for freedom. A lot of people, a lot of women fill those values with making one big travel per year. And they go to Peru or they go to Vietnam, and because then they see different cultures. I would like to say, and this is not judgmental, but they keep it about them or about their families and their own interest. What you're doing, what I'm doing, what is also the book about, It's Your Turn, is about using all these qualities and values and strengths and turn that into a mission that is beyond ourselves, that is, like you say, making this world a better place for a lot of people. So how do you do that? How do you go from this more egocentric, and again, not judgmental, how do you go from that more egocentric driven activities to something that is going for the bigger good?
That's a great question, Helena. I believe having that mission front and center, it's always above me, if you will, and knowing that anything that I do, if I view it through that lens of that mission, does that fit? Will that fit in terms of what I want to do next? At one point, I was invited to have a radio show with a group out of New York. and I called it The Art of Change. And I interviewed inspiring women leaders and change makers from around the world. And that was amazing because I learned from them how to do radio, right? Because the producer, had been in radio for 40 years. So it was like, when the email came offering me, I'd really then go inside myself and say, okay, am I meant to take advantage of this opportunity? And usually what I find is opportunities do come our way, certainly, when I basically put it out to the universe and say, okay, what's next? Or I use that screen of my mission and say, okay, how does that fit in? Like this book on Afghanistan, because you mentioned at the outset that I lived and worked in Afghanistan, and I helped the Ministry of Public Health develop their first strategic plan and built the capacity of internal teams to do strategic and operational planning. I knew in my bones for many years that I wanted to go to Afghanistan. And then when I got the email offering me to throw my hat into the ring for it, I went inside and I thought, do I really want to do this? Because originally it was working directly with women. And this was much bigger than that. And yet part of me had some fear. Oh my goodness, it's a 74 department ministry in a war zone. My initial contract was for 9 months, Elena, and it was to basically develop, co-create the strategic plan for the country, the Ministry of Health for the country, and build the capacity of internal teams as part of that process. 9 months, like in Canada, States, Europe, you could never get through all the policy layers and do that using participatory approaches. However, we did it in Afghanistan because I believed I could do it. There were times initially when I thought, oh my goodness, are these processes going to work here? And then my first day meeting my strategic planning team, I realized that the team lead got about 80% of what I was saying, and the rest of them didn't speak English. They spoke local language. And I'm like, oh, great. I'm supposed to build the capacity of these teams. And then this lovely woman managing an EU project came forward and said, look, Pam, I've got someone, I'll give you basically 15% of his time on a handshake. He was the one who translated my PowerPoints, who when I did national workshops would interpret for me. But it was just, again, it was two women leaders saying, okay, she said, I've got your back. I'm going to support you to do this. And then later on, she said, I've got a higher level team. Can they come to your capacity building workshops? I said, sure. So it's, going with the flow and trusting that everything's going to work out for the highest good.
Yeah, it is about building your community of support. It is about being resourceful. It is about thinking out of the box, basically. Do you have like role models, or have you encountered mentors that helped you to do this, to activate that capacity?
You know what, Elena, I haven't had really any formal mentors in my life, to be honest. And it may be because part of my life is an academic and it's rather a lone wolf type of environment. That's one of the reasons why I left it. That said, I had several bosses, one in particular, who really supported me and gave me opportunities. So although this one woman wasn't a formal mentor, she was originally from Europe. And it's when I worked for Health Canada, our federal health organization at the time. And she was very interested in international and global health. And even though we were in preventive health services, not international affairs and international health, she ended up being named Director of Policy for a World Health Organization program out of Copenhagen, out of the Euro office of WHO. So she, just after the Berlin Wall went down, I'm giving you an example, she would be over in Siberia, over in Moscow, talking to physicians, because she was a physician and a researcher, and finding out what they needed. And on one of her exploratory trips, she came back and she said, Pam, there's this group of Russian physicians and they're putting on this WHO multi-country meeting. They don't know what they're doing. And she said, you need to go over and straighten them out. You need to facilitate this multi-country meeting. This is in the early 90s, right? And I'm like, okay. And I said, and she basically said, phone somebody at Euro in Copenhagen, just tell them I said to do this and talk to them. So I phone up and I told them who I was and why I was calling. And I said, I guess we should set up a teleconference to talk to these physicians to help with the planning. Oh, she said, no, Pam, we won't do that. We'll just arrive a day early and tell them we've got it all sorted and you'll just facilitate it. So that's what I did. So like these incredible opportunities. So she gave me incredible opportunities like that, right? Really trusted that everything would work out. And it did. It did.
Yeah, a lot of us would say, yeah, these are incredible opportunities, and how am I going to do it? So, what strategies or rituals do you have in place that might be a source of inspiration or of ideas for the people watching this or listening in order to really nourish this curiosity, this optimism, this determination, this energy? What is it that you do in order to keep that going? Because you have been involved in a lot of amazing projects, longer term projects where nothing was yet there, where you had to structure, where you had to start from scratch. So, what is it that you built there in order to show up and at least have the minimum confidence in order to also invite other people to join and to participate, to contribute, to be positive, to be constructive?
There's a lot in that question.
I know. I was thinking the same. You were leaving the
Okay.
minute for answer.
Okay, I'll go in different directions. How do I prepare myself to be the best I can be? I have at least an hour-long morning practice that I do every day. That includes meditating for 18 to 20 minutes before I get out of bed. And I actually have, I'll give a plug here. I have downloaded on my phone a number of Deepak Chopra's meditations, and then he teamed up with Oprah. So I have a number of those programs. They had these 21-day meditations, and I plug into one of them and I listen and I lie there. And so before I get out of bed, I used to hit the ground running when I was younger and I had kids and I had all these things to do. Now I do this, so my body is calm before I get out of bed. Then I have some coffee, and then I pull an oracle card. Do you know what an oracle card is?
Absolutely. I have them every day.
I pull an oracle card and I ask, what message am I meant to receive from you today? The universe, I actually speak to Great Spirit and the others. I have some indigenous connection. I'm not sure when it started or how it came to me, but I speak to Great Spirit and the others. So then, and I read it and I think about it. And I thought, is that relevant? Is that interesting where I am today? And then I have a stretch routine. I actually had one of my hips replaced almost 2 years ago now. And so I have some osteoarthritis. So it's very important that I stretch. So I do a stretch routine that's partly meditative as well, and has some yoga poses in it. And I do yoga regularly. I used to do yoga 4 to 5 times a week, very intense. But since I've had my hip replaced, I do it three times a week for less time, a half an hour to an hour max, and not as intense. So these are ways that I prepare myself to go out into the world. Before I go to speak, or before I come on a podcast, before I'm going to do something where I have more of a public profile, I ground myself. I have a grounding exercise I do, and I often do release oxytocin, where you do 3 deep breaths in through your nose and then out through your mouth, and where it releases oxytocin, so I get very calm and grounded and relaxed. So I prepare myself before I do any of these things. What else? What part of the co-creation piece? I truly believe that multiple heads around the table are always better than one. And I believe a lot of times we have to experience that before we will believe it, because many of us are high achievers, have found out from a very young age that a lot of times, like in school, you'd be part of a team project. You'd end up doing most of it because a lot of people would just hardly do anything. And some of us got a bit resentful about that. And then you have to have, I believe, a positive experience where you really believe that a number of heads are better than one. And what happened for me is, again, my boss at Health Canada, she named me as co-chair of a national strategy. And she traveled most of the time. So really, I chaired it. And it was called Enhancing Prevention in the Practice of Health Professionals. And the Health Canada was the facilitator for a number of national organizations, the Canadian Medical Association, the nurses, a lot of health provider associations. And we went through this multi-layered process where we produced documents on everything from the education that all health providers should have the policies to support them, the programs, and then all different boards approve them. So it was a huge piece of work. And I also would like to acknowledge we had a great consultant, amazing facilitator who I learned a whole lot from. And yes, but anyway, so going through that process really made me realize the value of working on a team and co-creating. And through that process, we also hired people a woman to do some research. And one of the people that whose body of work she looked at was Barbara Gray. Have you heard of her? She's an organizational theorist who also was a seasoned negotiator. And she likened collaboration, a good collaborative process, to a kaleidoscope. And the multiple pieces of colored glass in the kaleidoscope to the multiple stakeholders around a multi-stakeholder initiative. And Delaney, you may be familiar with when you turn the kaleidoscope, the image changes. Yes. And it's so it's like when you have a co-creative process and you're working with a group of people who are aligned and can see the vision that you're moving toward, it's amazing. Like the whole is always greater than some of the parts. And it took me as co-chair of that initiative to really get that. And I think a lot of us need to do that, particularly if we've been academics or we've gone through a process where we've done a lot of work on our own and don't really trust others, but you really have to trust. You have to use a good process, and the big thing too, for me, that I've learned about collaboration is that you can't go in with a strong vested interest in the outcome. You have to go in open to possibility. Because if you go in with a vested interest in the outcome, you get positional. Exactly. And you really want to fight for that rather than saying, I trust that whatever we do here is going to be better than any one of us could ever create on our own.
Yeah, absolutely. And it takes a different or a specific mindset in order to do that, this co-creational, transformational mindset. Because like you say, if not, it is positional. And I believe that building a vision as such, where other people also can find themselves, that is really related to everybody involved, and then starting with a blank paper and bringing all the perspectives and all the ideas of all the stakeholders together, it is extremely powerful. And it's also extremely difficult, like you say, because we want to know, we think we have the answers, or we feel we have to have the answers, or we go for the first solution because this is how we are taught to lead. As executives, as entrepreneurs, it's okay, make your decisions, make your choices. And if you have a big project that is beyond yourself and even beyond an organizational goal, then it is not about that. It is about trusting the process and allowing things to emerge from a level playing field. And that's extremely interesting, but also very difficult to do. Yeah,
definitely.
Absolutely. Yeah, beautiful. Now, what about setbacks? Because we can bring our stories and everything is always perfect and everything turns out fine. And we know that it is not the case, that we have setbacks. We can have major ones, or we can have little ones where we are in Europe, we call that the procession of Echternach. You do 2 steps forward and 3 backward, and you feel like you're not going anywhere. And so how do you deal with those when you are really in this manifestation of your vision, when you are really working together with people, a very important project? If you succeed, that it might change the world for so many people, and then something happens. How do you deal with those? And what would be your advice for women that sometimes, especially when we are perfectionists, have such a trouble accepting setbacks or failure or whatever they want to call it?
Would you like me to frame this in an example?
Oh, yes, that would be wonderful. Yes.
Okay, I'll say at the outset, I believe that it's really important to say, what am I meant to learn from this? And try to look at the silver lining in something that happens. So try to flip it from something negative into an opportunity. And in the moment, it's often very hard to do that. But if I found that very helpful, Elena, to say, okay, what am I meant to learn from this?
Mm.
So what happened many years ago, I was a health promotion consultant and Canada had a federal provincial heart health initiative. So it was looking to promote healthy hearts across the country. It was multidimensional. It had to do with environments. And I was actually focusing on health inequalities. So groups and regions across Canada. That was when I was at the federal level. But before I went there, I was at the regional level. So it was a new position. I love new positions, Elena, because you can, I'm sure you do too, because you can carve them out, right? There is a danger there because you think you've informed people in higher up positions, and sometimes they don't really understand at the end of the day what you've done and why you've done it. Anyway, I was this health promotion consultant, so excited. We were the first regional health department out of the blocks in Canada for this federal provincial initiative, all these opportunities. I even had nurses seconded to work with me to create this mobile station that would assess people at different levels, their mental status, all the biological markers, all sorts. Anyway, and I was reporting to a deputy minister of health. And I thought I informed him and everything. And then what happened is after, I can't remember whether it was after 3 months or 6 months, in any event, I met with him and he said he was extending my probationary period. And I'm like, what? Here's me. I was working my tail off. I would work home on weekends. I was creating new ideas. And one of the things I did is I interviewed all the community health centers, which were not part of the health department, but they were separate entities, but we all are out about improving the health of people in our communities, right? And because this was part of a federal provincial initiative, we needed to bring them in and find out, I thought, about their ideas and how they were working, how they might want to fit into our larger program. So I interviewed all of these, and there were a whole bunch of them, the executive directors, and said, here's who I am, this is what we're planning to do, what would you like to do? And then I presented it and said, then I recommend we form a community advisory committee as we're moving along with our project to make sure that they have ownership, because we can't do all this ourselves. We have to, oh my God. And so based on that, they thought then I went to see the medical officer of health. He thought that I would rather work for a community health center than work for them based on what I'd done. Totally didn't get it, right? And it was very disconcerting in the moment, because I'm like, I'm working my tail off here and you're extending my probationary period. You think maybe I'm not doing a good job here. Anyway, I soldiered on and I kept moving. And at the end of the day, it worked really well. They formed the community advisory committee and I left and went to work in Colombia in South America anyway. And they ended up, anyway, it was very interesting. And then I went to a conference a few years later. And you know what, Elena, the medical officer of health came and sat beside me. And he didn't actually apologize, but it was like, I think it was his way of saying, you were right. I'm sorry that I did that to you. But that was a long time ago. And it was really disconcerting at the time. And then reflecting on it, was like, at the end of the day, they did listen to what I had to say. But in that moment, they didn't understand. They didn't get it.
Yeah. Yeah. I understand. I think this is something that we see very often, that we absolutely understand where we want to get, but the people that are surrounding us don't really know why we are doing certain things. And maybe this is something that I encounter, that is, we think it's obvious. We think this is normal. We think this doesn't really need explanation, but other people don't. They're not really mind readers. And this is something, especially as women, because we don't tend to talk a lot about our successes, to talk a lot about our achievements, we feel, oh, they will see it, they will read it between the lines. And no, they don't. It is about being very explicit without being afraid that people might think we're presumptuous or have our ego running. But it is about building that narrative of what we want to do and why we are doing it and what we want to achieve with that. I think that's a very interesting learning point also, but that's a very good example of how interpretations and assumptions and maybe also judgment of others are impacting basically what we are doing and how we are seen in our projects. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you
You're
for
welcome.
sharing that. Yeah. The fifth part of the book is the last part of It's Your Turn, and it is about the journey ahead. So if you are watching this, it means that you have gone a long way already. That means that you have worked yourself, and I'm explicitly using the word worked yourself through the four parts. And I use the word work because this is not a book that you just read and then you put aside. Well, you could do that, but it's not really, it's like you want to learn how to play tennis and you read a book and then you put it aside. No, you go into practice. That's also why we have these interviews and why we have the implementation part also via the website. So, Pamela, if you're looking at women that have gone through the book and that they have their vision and they have built their narrative and their story around that, and they have developed that network of support, and they are doing things are moving, things are going. And then there's, okay, this is working. Now what? Now, how can I take this bigger? What would be your main and your best advice for women that are really, on the verge of this next step in order to really take it further?
Allocating some dedicated time. For me, it's in nature. Maybe go on a retreat for yourself where you really pamper yourself and you're in a very quiet environment, and go inside and say, what's next? What's next? That to me is very huge. And spending the time, you might not get it right away, but continuing to immerse yourself in environments and giving yourself the time rather than being very busy. Because when we're really busy, we can't really tap into our inner wisdom, if you will. I like to call it our inner wisdom. And also, if you believe in whoever you speak to, Great Spirit in the others, God, the universe, whoever you speak to, really trusting that they will send you messages when the time is right, and be patient. Rome wasn't built in a day. And sometimes we're in a big hurry to say, okay, what are we doing next? And maybe it's meant to revisit what we've done and build on it. Certainly at this point in my life, I am feeling the need. After basically when I founded this nonprofit, I put my business on hold. It was a passion project, Female Wave of Change Canada. I put my business on hold, and now I'm looking at how am I going to reignite it in a different way. And looking at, okay, what I'm also consciously saying, what have I done before that I could build on to make it even stronger? And how can I reach more people? How can it be more visible? And looking also at my blind spots and, okay, what am I missing? And talking to a coach or a mentor, a colleague, and saying, what do you think would be really, at this point in my life, what you know me very well, what am I missing here? What area would you suggest I deliberate more on? Yeah. I guess those were a few things.
That's beautiful. And that so resonates. People who know me, they know that the inner work, the connection with nature, connection with universe, that is absolutely, I recognize it. This is what also is keeping me grounded and also keeping me thriving. And it is also what this book wants to offer, like the tools and the strategies and the awareness and the insights and the beautiful examples like you bring here, Pamela, in order to go inside and to understand that your inner compass is the only compass that we can rely on, because the world is extremely volatile. The world is extremely unpredictable. And for many women, it's a reason to contract and to live in fear, or at least in the comfort zone. And if you have that inner compass developed based on really knowing who you are, your identity, and your values, as you already mentioned also, and your vision and your mission, you can expand and you can open your heart, you can open your mind. And when you are in nature, this is what you can do, right? You can really open yourself and receive and understand the unique strengths and the unique gifts that we can bring to the world and how the world needs that. And I really want to thank you, Pamela, not only for being here and for supporting the book and for bringing your wisdom, but also for who you are and what you bring to the world and what you still will bring to the world, because I know this is an ongoing thing and it can be wherever in the world because you are a world traveler. But I highly appreciate what you're doing. And I know that you are a source of inspiration and encouragement for other women. So I'm so happy that I'm able to bring you here to like document the book and document what I want to bring also as a message, maybe even sometimes a little bit stronger than a message, like as a request for women to show up, to raise our voices, to show who we really are, to bring our best version. And I know that everybody is using that, bring your best version, but bring your gifts to the world, bring your words to the world, because we need it. We absolutely need it. It's time. And it's absolutely your turn. So thank you so much. Thank you, Pamela, for being here. And much love and much gratitude.
Thank you so much, Elena, for the opportunity. And your book is amazing. I really valued reading it and wish you much success in bringing it out into the world.
Absolutely. Success will be to be impacting as many women as possible and also walk the talk in terms of the benefits from the book, also share it, giving it back by empowering girls and women that are underrepresented and that are absolutely not as privileged as we are. It is so important that we can really make a movement of it. And thank you so much for your help. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.